Good evening. Welcome to tonight's shir. This is Parshas Pinchas. We have a number of interesting shilas which we're going to go through. So let's start off. So yesterday morning, someone comes over to me in shul and asks me that in the bracha which we say in davening, Birchas Krishma. So we say, Hashem rejuvenates on a daily basis the creation. As it says, it says in Kapitel Kuflamet, Hashem makes Oirim Gedolim, great luminaries, His kindness is evermore. So he's asking the Shaila like this. And before I take the Shaila, in Nusach Sfard, it follows after this. In Nusach we don't have that extra piece. And the reason is given that because the bracha here is thanking Hashem, acknowledging Hashem, that He created lights, as in the sun and the moon. So that's why we have the bracha at night and by day. You have the light at the night. By day is obviously the sun, and by night we also have the light of the moon and the stars. So that's what the poshed up shot of the bracha of Yetzer HaMa'eres. Oir Chodosh al Tzion Toir is a spiritual light, and that's not in the context of the bracha. So for that reason, we don't say it. Of course, those who do say it will explain however they will explain, but that's the reason for us our not saying it. And his kasha is the following: a very simple kasha. We read in Chumash Bereshis that the first day Eibush created Shnei HaMe'eres HaGdelim. He first created two large luminaries, and the sun and the moon were the same size. And then the whole story, how the Levona complained that you can't have two kings wearing the same crown. So Hashem says, good idea, go and diminish yourself. Okay. So then, after that, whichever the date of that was, after that, we don't have Shnei Be'eres HaGdelim. We have a Mor HaKoton, a Mor HaGodel, and Mor HaKoton. So the Pasuk, Hashem creates in the present tense. These Ma'eres HaGedolim is a problem. He's not creating them now. He created originally Shnei Ma'eres HaGedolim, and then he modified them. Indeed, in Kapitel Kuf Lamed Vav, it says after that, so Shemesh leMeshels Bayoim Kilo and Chasdei. So I said to him, really, the question is not only on the Siddur, it's also on the Pasuk, because the Pasuk in Tehillim, Kuf Lamed Vav, it says Le'oiseh Eirim Gedolim. It doesn't say She'oso, it says Le'oiseh. So it's saying it's in the present tense, a continuous creation. So this is the problem. So simply, they originally created Eirim Gedolim, Shnei HaMe'eres HaGedolim, this is in Pasuk Bereshis, and then there was a modification. So why are we saying now that Hashem is making Ma'eres HaGedolim, the Eiris Gedolim? That's the question. So what you have on the bottom of the screen is from the Sefer Yashmiya called Tilose from Rabbi Heber, which is a likut from hundreds of Sfarim. And he's got two Pirushim, both from Sfarim called Tilul David. Now, unsurprisingly, at the back of it, when he's got a bibliography, he's got a list of Sfarim, and he's got 5 Sfarim called Tilul David. So I'm not sure which one's which. But meanwhile, he says, this one Tilul David says, if the Kavana or Eirim Gedolim is the sun and the moon, but they're mentioned in the next 2 psukim. Therefore, Nirda Kavana la'oira eliki. The Kavana is to a godly light, which that is manifest through miracles, etc. And Abish is bringing this light every year. When there was when the miracles, but I think this is similar to the word of the Baal Shem Tov, that how there's like the same event which happened then is repeated every year at that date. Possibly that's what they say. So this Iris, the Eirin Gedolim refers to Mofsim. That's how he is. The second Hillel David quotes the Alshich, and he says, "Vayhi Oir," doesn't say "Vayhi Chen," it says "Vayhi Oir," because it's alluding to two Iris. An Oir Lekia godly light, and then you have a physical light of the Eirachal. And that's the Kavanah L'Oirim Gedolim. Doesn't say L'Oisim Oiris, as it has back in Bereshis, because it doesn't mean the Shemesh and Yoreach, but it refers to these two Iris. However, you learn Pshat over here. That's nice. If you say that L'Oisim Gedolim means a spiritual light, then you go back to why can't you say also which is a light, which is not a physical light. And there you had the objection because that's not the Oris which mean Kipshutai. So then the same thing, though, like if the Oris say Orim Gedolim means spiritual lights, then also that doesn't fit into the context over here, which we're talking about the Me'eris of the physical lights which we acknowledge. Ibn Ezra and the Radak on this possible Orim Gedolim, he says that this is a heading, and then it goes into details. So he's saying, they are saying, Orim Gedolim is talking about the two, but even the moon is also Godel. And Orim Gedolim is kind of as if forgetting about the fact that they were originally both the same size. Orim Gedolim, maybe should put these large bodies, and one is by Yom and one is by Laila. Not such a smooth shot. Okay. So I was quite baffled by this question, and I did a bit of a search to see whether anyone comments on this. So this is what I managed to dig up. Sefer, very much a contemporary Sefer, as a grandson of the Kaf HaChaim. So he wants to suggest the following. Just like Ma'aseh Bereshis, there was first Eirim Gedolim, and then there was a process of diminishing them. So too, Keinu Ato. So it's an ongoing process. That the Eibishter is in continually creating Oirim Gedolim and diminishing them to be the Shemesh bigger and the Yerech smaller. So it's La'oise Oirim Gedolim in the present tense, and so that is both are happening, Oirim Gedolim and the diminishing. So you have something. If you don't Chassidus, you know about Elam HaTorah and Shvias HaKelim. Was that in history, or was that an ongoing thing? There's an ongoing Shvias HaKelim, an ongoing spreading of Nitzosis. It's higher than time. This is more difficult to say, but this is his answer. The Lo'os Eirim Gedolim is an ongoing process, as well as the diminishing into the two sizes of Shemesh and Yereach. Right. Someone writes, I learned that the difference was if the brocha on what was created rather than what is to come. Okay, fine. Upon him, this is as far as I got. And if I ask a kasha and I don't have a teretz, it's also limited teretz, yeah? Let's move on. So I got this question. Someone asked me about there is an Indian of wearing tefillin until Aleinu, and is asking if I take off my rashes and I put on my Rebbein Tam's tefillin, have I fulfilled that minhag? So let's explore a little bit this minhag. Where does it come from? So this is in Shulchan Aruch, in Chaber, in Siman Chafei. Nago Olam, it's customary not to remove the tefillin until after Kedushas Ovoletzi. So just to clarify a little bit, in Ovoletzi we have למען לא ניגע לו ריק ולא נלד לבהלו, ובכן יהי רוצה מלפניך שנשמע חוקיך בעולם הזה. So you may know that it's a minig that Rebbe was nohig to touch the tefillin at this point, whether it was by L'man Niga Lorik or by the next piece of Shenish Mechokecha. But there are those who take off the tefillin at this point. To explain, there's a machlokes in the Shas whether Laila Zman tefillin or Laila Lav Zman tefillin. So we have a pasuk in Parshas Kadesh Likol B'Cher, V'shomartos achuka hazois miyomim yomimo. It's just talked about the tefillin, V'shomartos achuka hazois miyomim yomimo. So those who say that Lailo Lav Zman tefillin, they say the following: V'shomartos achuka hazois, referring to the tefillin, miyomim yomimo. You should wear tefillin miyomi, only by day. So therefore, if you take off your tefillin, so that you shouldn't be wearing them by night, so the Yerushalmi says you should say a bracha. We don't pass them that way, but the lashon here, which is we have in Avodat Zion, that is me'en the bracha of the nusach of Yerushalmi. Achoyletz tefillah yevorech So that's the reason why some people, there's one minhag which is mentioned, to wait till after Kedushas Avodat Zion, and by this point, when you say Shenish Mechokecha Boil Maseh, to take off the tefillin at that point. Then there's another minhag to wait till after Kaddish, after Avodat Zion. Then there's another minhag to wait for Aleinu. The Arizal would wait for Aleinu, which I didn't see an explanation for that. And then there's a minute to wait for after the Kaddish after Aleinu. And now we're going to go into that a little bit. So here we have, as I said, the Machaber, Yosef Karo says, leave the tefillin on until after Kedusha Avodat Zion, and I've just added a little bit more detail at that, the Man L'Niga Lorik and Shenish Mechokecha. V'yesh Mishakos, Al Tzad HaKabbalah. This is the Ramah writing that you should not remove the tefillin until you've said 3 times Kedusha and 4 times Kaddish. The 3 times Kedusha, you've said in Birchas Krishma, you said Kaddish. In Chazar Sashat, you've answered Kaddish. Then in Avodat Zion, again you have Kaddish. So by the time you've gone through Avodat Zion, if you're down with the minyan, so you've had Kedusha 3 times. How do you get 4 Kaddeshim? So the first Kaddish minimum is the Kaddish after Yishtabach, by Yovorchu, Kaddish after Shmonesra after Tachnun, and the Kaddish after Avodat Zion. Those are 3 Kaddeshim. Where's the 4th Kaddish? So in Nusach Ashkenaz, right after Avodat Zion, straight into Aleinu. So after Aleinu, there's a Kaddish Yosef. So that's where the other minhag is, to wait till the Kaddish after Aleinu. So we have here Ramah saying a minhag of leaving the tefillin on until having said 3 times Kedusha and 4 having listened to 4 times Kaddish. The source of the Ramah on the margin is given to a Sefer HaMusar. This is a Sefer. I looked up the Sefer HaMusar from Rabbi Yehuda Chalas. I don't know any more biographical details of this Rabbi Yehuda Chalas. It's spelled with a tzaddik at the end, Chalatz. And he says, he's talking about various Zehidasin, and he says, you should not remove the tefillin until after Kaddish Teskabel. And that way you've got 3 Kaddeshim. And the 3 Kaddeshim correspond to the shin of 3 legs or 3 heads on one side of the tefillin. And also you should make sure to answer 4 times Kedusha. And that corresponds to the shin, which has 4 legs or 4 heads on the other side of the tefillin. So the 3 and the 4, 3 Kaddeshim and 4 Kedushas, or the Ramah has it the other way around, 3 Kedushas and 4 Kaddeshim. So they are corresponding to the 3 and the 4 heads or legs on the shinin of the tefillin. That's as much as he says. He doesn't give any more explanation. And this Sefer Hamusa, he's said 4 kedushas because he counts Borchos Hashem and Veirach also as a kedusha. Later Mefarshim struggle with this, but be that as it may. So we have here a source in early Sfarim of leaving the tefillin on until such time that you want the 3 kedushas or 4 kadeshim, 3 kadeshim, whatever it may be. Now we come back to our basic question, whether taking off rashes and putting in Rabbeinu Tam's is fulfilling this inyan, or is it not? So there's a difference of attitude between Bali Nigla and the Bali Kabbalah. And that is whether rashes and Rabbeinu Tam's, it's either me or you, or both are true. And Alpi Nigla, it's either rashes or Rabbeinu Tam's. So according to that, therefore, taking off your tefillin, you're not fulfilling anything by putting on Rabbeinu Tam's. But according to Kabbalah, both are tefillin, and therefore, well, says, all right, so you've put not these tefillin, those tefillin, so you can still be in fulfillment of that minhag even if you switch. So here, what you have now on the bottom of the screen is from a sefer called Ois Chaim V'Sholem, from the Minchas Elazar. So the previous piece he was discussing is there, of course, it's very important to wear tefillin when you're saying Shema. How about Shemona Esrei? Is it imperative to have tefillin when you daven Shemona Esrei? The question is will have 2 applications. If let's say a person didn't have tefillin, and then someone brought him tefillin, and he's already said Shema, he's about to daven Shemona Esrei. Oh, very nice. He's happy, he has the tefillin. He puts them on. Does he say a bracha? Is he mafsik in the middle of Ezras to say a bracha on the tefillin? If it's important to have tefillin for Shemona Esrei, so then he would make a bracha. If it's not crucial, you can daven Shemona Esrei without tefillin, so then he shouldn't be making a bracha. You can put them on, but do the bracha afterwards. It's not called for so strongly over here. Another question would be, let's say a person davens Shemona Esrei, finish davening, then you realize he forgot to say Yalav Yovei, Shamach Shavuruach, whatever it may be, a mistake which requires that he repeats Shemona Esrei. He's already taken off his tefillin. Does he have to put on the tefillin again to daven Shemona Esrei to make up for his mistake? So if you say there's a chiyuv that Shemona Esrei you should be wearing tefillin, so then you should put on tefillin. Okay. So now, if you say, this is the Mukasher say, if you say there's a chiyuv to wear tefillin for Shemona Esrei too, so now the Pri Megadim saw Eden taking off rashes and putting Rabbeinu Tam's in the middle of Chazar Sashas. And he lashes out very sharply. He doesn't like this at all. He says, if you start switching, taking off your rashes tefillin in the middle of Chazar Sashas, you're missing out what it says in Shulchan Aruch and Simin Chafes, if you're Gimel, which we learned a couple of minutes ago. The second point which he objects to the switching in the middle of Chazar Sashas is because you're meant to be focusing on Chazar Sashas. It's not spare time. It's the Chazan is davening, it's a tefillas hatzibur, and so the tzibur should be focusing on what the Chazan is saying, rather than doing their own thing of unrolling and rolling tefillin. And then he goes further. I want to even ask. I don't want to get into any. I'm not interested in that tirutz. If I'm not mistaken, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch quotes this almost verbatim. He says it's wrong to switch the tefillin in during Chazar Shabbat, and they say he's echoing the frustration of the Pri Megadim. Minchas Elazar, so he sees that there are some Chassidim v'Yanshe Ma'aseh who did so. Hagam, he says, we're not going to follow this. He says his personal minhag, he waits till after Aleinu. But Yeshli Yashiv in Hogam V'Loire Matirutzam Shohoy Alehem. He says he can explain that if you put on Rabbeinu Tam's, so then you're also fulfilling this din that you should wear the tefillin also for 3 Kedushas or 4 Kedushas or Kadeshim, he says you can fulfill that with Rabbeinu Tams also. Although he himself doesn't do that, but this is the question which is asked if he switched. So also the question, practical question, the person needed to use the bathroom in the middle of davening. So he took off his tefillin into the bathroom. He comes back. He wants to finish off davening. Let's say he's before Volotzian. Does he have to put on Rashi's or can he put on Rabbeinu Tam's? So according to the Munkich's approach, it's okay to do Rabbeinu Tam's. He'll fulfill the same meaning. All of this is not from Minhag Chabad because we have. So in other words, in Chabad we don't switch the tefillin in the middle. It's just kind of a b'di'evet situation as far as we're concerned. What we have here is in Hayem Yom, your Anash.org, when he's talking about the guidance for people who wear 4 sets of tefillin, that the first Rashi is worn from Ezeu Mekoimon until after Ach Tzadikim. And then switch off, take off the Tefillin Shel Rosh and put on the Tefillin Shel Rosh, and then you'll say the Tilim for the Fiach Hadesh. This is all very nice for people who are davening on their own, Ba'ariches. We saw by the Rebbe that he said the Tilim Hayomi when the Rebbe was Chazan, he said, or even not, the daily Tilim of the Fiach Hadesh was said in Rashi's Tefillin. So that's the general meaning of Chabad, that we leave the Rashi's Tefillin on until after Tilim, unless you're in a rush, etc. Okay. So that's how our minig is. If a person had to switch, so then I don't think it's a miss of the minhag which is mentioned for the Sefer HaMusar and the Ramah, etc. Let's move on to the next question. So, in the past, I've told some people about my understanding that it's preferable to cover, to not bring Friday night, not to bring the food to the table until after Kiddush. Now, I'm saying this as a hidur, not as a din. Sometimes you've got a large crowd. It's going to be impractical to not put out the food before. But if it's in a smaller scale, so instead of bringing the salads, the fish before Kiddush, you leave them in the kitchen till after Kiddush, and then after Kiddush, you go to wash Netilas Yadayim, before or after, whatever, then you can bring the next course to the table. So someone asked me where did I get it from. So here we have in Siman Reish Ayin Aleph, it is that it's customary to cover the bread at the table before Kiddush. So there are 3 reasons for the fact that we cover the chalas with a cloth, but here he gives the following reason. Why do we cover the lechem, the bread for during Kiddush? Kadesha tisroe hapas, to give the impression that the bread was brought just now in honor of Shabbos, the Shabbos which you mentioned at Kiddush. So now we brought the bread in honor of Shabbos. That's why we keep it covered until after Kiddush. So let's read. So that's in Sif Yud. Let's read further in Sif Yud Zayin. Although it's appropriate to have the table all set before Shabbos comes in, but this table is set, but it's not brought to the one doesn't bring the table to the dining area until after Kiddush. So you have a table set in one room, and then after Kiddush, the tables are brought into the dining area. So that it should be evident that this whole Suda isn't covered of Kiddush. If the tables were brought before Kiddush, then you'd have to cover the entire table with a cloth. Then he goes further, that's all very well in the olden days, where they used to have small tables, and you had servants bringing a table to each one. And that would have the various foods on that. So those small tables would be set in the next room, and people would have Kiddush, and then they would sit down on their lounges, whatever, and then the small tables were brought before each one. Nowadays, that we have large tables, and therefore it's not practical to start transporting the table after Kiddush. It should be a hefsek with the kiddush and the meal. Therefore, it's customary to have the table in place from before kiddush and to cover the pas. So he doesn't say about covering everything else. He just says about covering the pas. Okay, so you see, the svara would apply to all the foods. Practically, it's not a chiyuv in Shulchan Aruch. It says the ikir is to cover the bread, but it's a recommended thing. Actually, someone pointed out to me that this issue is particularly relevant at the nighttime kiddush. The nighttime kiddush, where in kiddush you're saying Kaddish Shabbos, okay, says Lakova, this Shabbos, that's now you're bringing the foods. By day, you're not saying kiddush, you're saying a Ber Pri Hagofen, and that's it. Therefore, that the Shmiras Shabbos Kilchosa quotes from Shlomo Zalman, that is not such an issue. This whole emphasis of it has to be brought to covered Shabbos is more applicable at night than during the day. Someone's asking that by the Seder, all the items are on show. All right, there's another discussion. Right. The matzah is actually not on show, but okay, let's move on. Someone's asking a practical question, whereas Tisha B'Av is on a Sunday, and there are various medications which can be taken to make the fast easier. Slow release caffeine, slow release paracetamol, whatever it may be. I don't know the chemical details. But the question is, can you take that tablet on Shabbos? What's the question? And on Shabbos, as we're learning on now in the Shulchan Aruch Shir and Shabbos afternoon, on Shabbos we shouldn't be taking medicines for minor conditions, for michush b'yalma. Person has got a more serious illness, so they do take a medication on Shabbos. But for a minor thing, one doesn't take a medication on Shabbos. So here's the question: is this called taking medicine on Shabbos? Right, so let's take a look at what we have here from the Piskei Shuvas and Siman Shin Chav Ches, If Samach Gimel, and he's saying, well, it talks about a person using some kind of a medicine thing, but he's actually feeling perfectly well. So there's a heter. He's I'm odem bori. It's only a choile. A person's suffering something, but a person is feeling perfectly okay is allowed to take some kind of whatever it may be, what is discussed there. I didn't look it up today. But then he says, by extension, it could be for fertility, for male function, for contraceptive, for sorting out the cycle, to a person who has sleeping problems, help them sleep, to help them not sleep. Then he has here tablets to fast easier. There's people who are overweight who may want to take a tablet to help them feel less hungry, and therefore they won't have to eat so much. So you see, basically, in all of these cases, the person is not ill. The person is basically functioning normally, and so these medications are not really for a chayla. Therefore, there's room to say that you are allowed to use. There are those who disagree with this, and they say that after all, they're not foods. You're not eating them to satisfy your hunger. You're not eating them to indulge. Therefore, they do fall into the category of medication. As a result, the recommendation he has is, if you need to use any of these medications on Shabbos, you should preferably crumble it in and mix it into a food or a drink from before Shabbos, and then you'll have it on Shabbos. It's like it's already mixed in. So I told this to the person who asked me this question, and she said that actually, to her understanding, the genius of these tablets is a slow release. That somehow the tablet is made in a way that it will release the medication. I guess layers are dissolving and they'll release them over 12 hours or something like that. If you take the same tablet and dissolve it in water before Shabbos, so then it's not going to have the slow release. It's just going to have its immediate effect. And after that, you won't have the effect. So once she tells me that, so I said, okay, well then you're going to go back to the original psak that you are allowed to use them on Shabbos. I mean, there's another kind of argument you could say in relation to the fast aid tablets, is a person who is so unwell that they are bedridden is allowed to take medicine on Shabbos. Now, you could argue it's a little bit of a stretch, but to say, if I don't take these tablets, then tomorrow I'll be bedridden. So I should be allowed to take them today, so I shouldn't be bedridden tomorrow. Possible. Let's move on. So just this week, a Bacha came over to me and asked me if in the middle of Shemona Esrei, I realize I'm facing the wrong direction. What should I do now? So I'm embarrassed to say, I don't remember. I remember it's discussed in Shulchan Aruch, but so I looked it up, and that's why I'm sharing it with you. So one should be davening towards Shalim, etc. If you are facing by mistake to the north or to the south rather than to the eastwards direction, then it's enough to to bend your head to your face towards the Mizrach, but don't move your legs. What about if your mom is facing the opposite direction? Then just continue. So again, the first thing is if you can tilt your face towards Mizrach, that's okay, that's good. If that's not practical because your neck doesn't have a facility to do a 180-degree turn, okay, so then just continue davening. And because there are those who hold that it's not so imperative to daven towards Eretz Yisrael, and therefore, if you're facing the wrong direction, just continue your davening as you are, and the Eibishter will sort out the directions. Okay, so we come on to another question which I was asked this week. I guess it's the weather, but you got now gentlemen walking around in shorts, and they come to shul. He says he had a fellow who had yahrzeit, wanted to have an aliyah, he came into shul wearing shorts. Is it okay? Is it not okay? So generally, more Hamish Yidden wouldn't do that, but so he has an interesting definition. When you daven, you should be presentable, like when you had to meet someone important. How would you present yourself? So in some circles, it's standard, to walk around just a t-shirt and a yarmulke. They don't know wear jackets. And even if they'd have anoshim chashuvim, this is certainly in Israeli society, this is quite common. So if that being the case, one cannot make an issue about that. And even if they're walking without socks, if that's common in the summer, it's also, you cannot be moicha, because it's and also he says about short sleeves, short trousers. But when he goes to the Yomid as a chazan, or for Aliyah L'Torah, then it should be expected that they should be wearing something more. Now, the problem is with shorts. Mainly with the short sleeves or something, you can give a talus. With short trousers, it's a bit harder to find a creative way. So I guess if you had the yahrzeit, he's there in shul, you'd give him the aliyah, I think, in a Beis Chabad. I think it would be still appropriate to afterwards, in a quiet moment, to say that next time I would be happier if you'd come with longer trousers when you come for you want to have an aliyah on your yahrzeit. After all of this, he says, of course, though there are heterim to be tolerant of this, the person's got a bit of reach Torah, he should be careful about davening, dafka, wearing a hat and jacket, etc. And today, even people who normally go around just shirt sleeves, when they have an important meeting, they will possibly likely wear a suit. When they make a wedding or they're one of their children, they will wear a suit. So if you would wear a suit or wear a jacket for a Chosheva event, so then you should really have the same consideration when you're davening. I think I told you this before. I told the story with Mordechai Eliyahu. I heard a talk from his grandson. I remember the whole story with the Yibum, but he also said that his Zeder Rav Eliyahu often had visiting politicians, and the Svardish Rav Roshi has got this mauve cloak and this fancy turban, or whatever it's called. And so for a photograph, it's much more interesting to have the Rav Roshi wearing all his Shmoyne Begodim. But he refused. When people would come to visit him, he would be wearing a sweater or something. It wouldn't be. And they asked him, could he put on the? He says, no. If he'd do this for a politician, he'd have to do this every day when he davens for Esrei. When he davens for Esrei, he wasn't putting on his. It was only for formal occasions, but for Shemon Esrei, he wasn't doing this. He says if he does it for a politician, he'd have to do it every time he does Shemon Esrei. So he refused. Right. So someone's asking, it's a minyan. There's only one lady wearing shorts. Yes, but you can't. If you need to give the aliyah to the Levi, so then it's a kind of shasat chad. But again, a quiet word in the fellow's ear for the next time might be appropriate. Right, we're going to the next question. The city park. So now to explain, there's a concept called karfif. Karfif is got a din of Carmelis, which means you're not allowed to carry in it like in Rosh Hashanah. Like in Rosh Hashanah, you're not allowed to carry Daled Amis. So in a Karfif, you're also not allowed to carry Daled Amis, or more than Daled Amis. What is a Karfif? An area which is 50 by 100 Amis, and it's not Hukef Ledire. It's not adjacent. It's not being. It's not for dwelling purposes. And that is an area of this size, which is not for dwelling purposes, so it becomes like a carmelis, and you're not allowed to carry there. Now I want to just throw in another spin-off of this. Imagine you have an Eruv of a town, a good Eruv. In the middle of the town there's a field, and that field is more than base Sosai, more than 50 by 100 amas, is 25 by 50 meters, about nothing. If that field has got no fence, so that field is a karfif. And a karfif is a place where you're not allowed to carry. That would invalidate the whole Eruv. Why? Because the whole Eruv area is exposed to an area where you mustn't carry. And therefore, if you have such a field, if you have a karfif area within an Eruv, the karfif area would have to have a mechitza to separate it from the rest of the Eruv area. Okay, so now here's the question: what about a city park? Baruch Hashem, London is blessed with many nice parks, and now they are typically more than 50 by 100 amas. Do they have a dwelling? Not necessarily. They may have just maintenance rooms, but not anyone lives there. Sometimes they're even locked at night. So, min hadin, are you allowed to carry within such a park? So here you have from the Piskei Teshuvos. This is from the volume on Eruvin, Mashin und Ches. So here's a chiddush to say the following: that places which are designated for human use, for regular use, an area where it's for people to go and enjoy, to go for walks, they are also not in the gather of karfif, because the word of karfif means It's not a place which is used on it by people on a regular basis. It's more out of use. That's why it's a karfif. But these parks are tashmishe odom betediros. They are used by people on a regular basis, and therefore a garden like a ginas noim. It's like a garden, or flower garden, orchard, but it's made for beauty rather than for agricultural purposes. Even that's also called tashmish adam. So this is a big chiddush, because when you read the Gemara Bepashtus, the karfaf has to be hukaf ledira, and has to be adjacent to a dwelling. You've got grounds of a house, of a mansion. Those grounds are not considered a karfaf. Here it's taking it one step further, and even if it's not adjacent to a dwelling, but because it's dedicated for regular pedestrian use rather than for growing stuff or for not growing anything, but it's not like out of regular human use. Therefore, it doesn't have the din of a karfif. Therefore, there wouldn't be an isur to carry more than dal damas within that space. Let's move on. And I'm addressing this question. No one asked me the question whether the inyan of writing Hashem's name G-D, whether that is, in all foreign publications, it's we instead of writing G-O-D, we spell it G-D. Of late, I've seen a couple of svarim, books rather, from Chassidish Yidden, and they have the title as a G-O-D. One of them I asked how come. So he says he wants to reach to an audience. If they see G-D, they won't use the book. They won't buy the book. And he wants to get to those, not because he wants to have the sales. He wants to get through to those people. And this is so off-putting so I don't know whether these people have discussed with Rabbonim, but I felt if I do have such a forum, I felt a duty to discuss this a little bit. So you have several letters of the Rebbe about this standard. But here particularly, we have a letter printed in Igros Kodesh Chelik Tes. Now this is a letter to an author of a book. It doesn't have a name. So I'm not even sure whether it was written in English or in Hebrew. In Pashtus, it was in English. Yeah, just a second. So now, here's the following. The Rebbe writes, here I'm giving you several of my comments. This is not a haskama. This is not an approbation for your book, because the Rabbeim didn't have that custom to give haskamas and svarim, largely. And also, if you don't take out from the books those points which I feel are misleading, then I don't give you permission to mention that I saw the manuscript either. It shouldn't seem as if I have given consent to something which I feel is a michsham, which is misleading. And so there's about 3 pages of comments. So I've just got one here. He starts off, V'hakdama, first one. A sefer which is written in Sofa Hamduberes, which means in English. It's made for regular, simple people. All the inyonim which are misleading or confusing to a simple person, it might give them a condescending view of inyonim Torah mitzvahs. Such a material shouldn't be there. So you have sometimes people come up with, discoveries about this, about that, and sometimes it's possibly the scoop is it's a discrediting a view which is a traditional view. It's sensational. That kind of sensationalism is actually giving a sense of condescending attitude. Oh, he says that so and so says it's just it's not serious. It's not authentic. That's not good material, not healthy material to give to a pashta person. That's the overall comment. And then, as I say, there's about 3 pages. But here, the point which I want to share is the following. B'chol mokem shekosav shem habeire b'Yiddish v'hu adin b'Anglis. This is a book, yeah? Wherever Hashem's name comes up, whether it's in Yiddish or in English, it should be written Gimel dash test, sorry, and not written in full. And I guess in English also G-D, not written in full. Shivvitas kamo me'achroinim chal al zeh kedushas Hashem. So according to some achroinim, that even Hashem's name written in another language, as in Russian or in Polish, whatever, the Alter Rebbe brings Boga, Dios, wrote in Poskim. So that has got to Kedushas Hashem. So just like we are careful with Hashem's name written in Lashon Kodesh, and it shouldn't come to disgrace, so too, if it's written in a foreign language, in English or whatever, one should be careful not to write Hashem's name in full. Now, it's clearly talking about a book, not talking about... Now, the reason why you might have thought a book is different, because a newspaper, a magazine, ends up largely in the bin, and therefore I can understand the greater concern that Hashem's name will be put into disgrace. Whether a book people don't throw away so readily, that could be the argument. I can understand where the argument's coming from, but I see here that the Rebbe didn't buy that argument, and he said even in the book, it's an exception of something like a Siddur or Chumash, which is, he's got Hashem's name written in Lashon Kodesh all the way through. So you have also Hashem's names written G-O-D or L-O-R-D, etc. I'm going to also confess that I was asked by one of the publishers of one of these videos, regular video things. They asked me whether it's okay to have G-O-D in their, whatever they call it, the running commentary. And I said it is okay. And the reason there is because it's just digital and it's not in print. Therefore, there's no question of it coming to disgrace. I may have been wrong in saying that, because possibly that also led to this, which we've seen recently, people being not so careful about it. But okay, as it may. But I wanted to just bring out how from the Rebbe it's quite clear that here's a reference to say Chemed. You want to also look up more in Shulchan Menachem Chelik Hey. There's a few letters about this. So that has been the standard by Chodesh Yidden, that Sfarim, or so now books, where Hashem's name comes up. It's not a Sefer Tefillah, not a Sefer of a Torah Mamish. So Hashem's name is written G-D rather than G-O-D. Let's move on. So you may remember we had some while back a whole discussion about a fellow who had very, very concerned about his tefillin not being in the center, and he was really struggling because he found it to an extreme level of concern, which is he has been taking consultation with a doctor to help him with his anxiety. But meanwhile, someone pointed out the following. One of our listeners pointed out there's a difference here between Gasas Tefillin and Dakas Tefillin. As you can see on the screen, the gap, the distance between the two compartments in Gasas, in Dakas, which is on the left of the screen, that is about perhaps 1 millimeter, 1.5 millimeters. By contrast, the gap or the distance between the two parshas in a Gasas Tefillin is going to be about 5-6 millimeters. So that gives you a little bit more, should we call wiggle room, where if the tefillin are slightly off center by a millimeter, it would still be okay. Now, I'm not sure about this, and this is the Alter Rebbe's Loshen in the Siddur. Now, just to understand, the Siddur is the halachas in the Siddur are much shorter than the Shulchan Aruch, and my feeling is that the Alter Rebbe in the Siddur, he gave a lot of practical stuff, which is people possibly were not so cautious about, and that's why he felt the need to put them on record in the Siddur, which he published B'Chayav and Tovkov Samach Gimel. So here he talks about putting after the Shal Yad, put on the Shal Rosh. high up on the forehead, and it should be be'emtza roichav harosh mamash. It should be in the middle mamash. Why so? Big chiddush of the Alter Rebbe. Because before it says bein einecho doesn't mean it has to be in the middle mamash. But here the Alter Rebbe says it has to be middle mamash. Why? Because the Gemara says the two parshas Kaddish v'Hoyev Kiviyach have to be on the right. Shema v'Hoyev Shemoyo have to be on the left. And the Tefillin of Rashi, where Shema and V'Hoyev Kiviyach are right next to one another. So therefore, between left and right, there's only a tiny, tiny space. Which is now look at here's the interesting thing. The Hainu hacharitz shebein shema v'Hoyev Shema. It's the groove. So this is where it becomes interesting. The groove in Dakas and Gasas is the same mashu. So although l'chayre in Svara, so long as the Parshas Shema is on the one side of the of the middle, and V'Hoyo and which one is it? And V'Hoyo Kiviyach is on the other side, so you're good. But the Alter Rebbe says he's worried about he says the charitz, as if the main thing is that the charitz has to be in the middle, rather So reading this, the Alter Rebbe's Loshen, it looks like there's no difference between Gasas and Dakas. The main thing is on either side of the charitz, that the compartments, the walls of the compartments, this has to be on the left, this has to be on the right. Whereas if it's the essential, the parashas should be on the respective sides, then there seems to be a bit of leeway, but that doesn't fit in the Lashon very well. Now, I want to say that although the Alter Rebbe seems to be saying that the emphasis on being careful about and being in the middle is by Tefillin Rashi. Now, we all know the story of the Alter Rebbe being given a gift of a snuff box. And he said, he commented that there's one organ in the body which doesn't have a taiva, which doesn't have a passion, and you want to stuff that one also. And so he refused to use the snuff box for snuff, and he disconnected the lid of the silver box, and he used it for a mirror for the tefillin. Everyone knows this story. It goes a little bit more. When the Alter Rebbe was in prison, so he was in his cell, and the way it's written in the Sikha, the Frierdiker Rebbe, he was putting on Rabbeinu Tam's, and he took out the tefillin, this lid, this silver lid, to make sure that his tefillin are in the middle. And at that point, the interrogators came in, and they were awestruck. They saw the Rebbe in such as they saw the spirituality. They were awestruck, and they couldn't, and they didn't bother him. They went away. After the Alter Rebbe comes out of prison, he tells over this story to Chassidim, and he says that what it says, and the nations of the world will see that you, and it says the Chazal, Elu tefillin sheberosh. You wear tefillin sheberosh, so the goyim will see and they will be fearful of you. So one of the Chassidim asked the question, why does it happen to the Rebbe? Why doesn't it happen to us? The Alter Rebbe responded, it doesn't say tefillin elu tefillin she'al hareish, elu tefillin sheberosh. The tefillin are, how do you say, internalized, then that will have the effect. But meanwhile, this whole story is with Rabbeinu Tam. So before people are going to say, oh, we're Rabbeinu Tam, it doesn't matter. Well, we had to ask some Choshorim at least. So we should be particularly in Rabbeinu Tam also. Okay, one last point, and that is last week I spoke about the bracha on frozen grape juice, of whether it's hagofen or shahakol. So one of our listeners sent me a couple of comments. Number one, he's in New York, and he says there you can buy commercially produced ice pops and grape juice flavor. He says the grape juice flavor ones probably never saw grape in their life. It's just made with chemicals, or a lot of it is chemicals. Okay, so that's point taken. So that's not the question, that's shahakal in any case. But then we had this little to and fro. I had said the reason, one of the arguments to say that you don't have to, it doesn't qualify for hagofen, because the Hagofen is because of Hamisameach, Yain Hamisameach. And I was questioning whether sucking an ice pop of frozen wine will be Misameach. And he brought to my attention there are actually alcoholic flavored ices. Baruch Hashem, they haven't come en masse to this part of the world, but across the pond, it's a very common thing. And people are already complaining about it, but and apparently sucking such a vodka ice apparently has a similar effect as having a little bit of kapmashke. And so the Musameach aspect, the alcohol aspect, apparently happens also with the frozen ones. If that's the case, so then one has to think more carefully about if it's like a wine. And then the third question you point out is what about bracha achrona? Once you say if it does have the effect of yain, then becomes and there you can't say you're yotze with the bar nefashos, because if it needs to be me'en sholish, so then you're not yotze with bar nefashos. So that really I'm going to leave here as a question. So not chilosim b'soifon. I left you with a kasha about the begin about the Oisraelim Gedolim, Hilayim Chastoi. How is that an ongoing thing? And now I'm leaving with a question, an open question. If you have a kazayis, b'chnei achilas pras of frozen wine, should you be saying a bracha achrona? And I say kazayis because when it comes, first of all, when it's a food, it's the shias of kazayis. But even as it is, there's a svara that on wine you are chayav b'bracha achrona even with the kazayas, and that's why practical thing when you should either, if you're having wine, either you have less than the kazayas or you have a revius, because otherwise you're going to be entering in a suffix whether you should be making a bracha achrona or not, and says a shalav mivatel a mitzvah of bracha achrona. So either you have less than the kazayas or you have more than you have a revius or more. So back to the frozen wine, you're actually entering a shaila of what bracha achrona should be if you have a kazayas. With this, I'm going to wish you all a good Shabbos.
Good evening, Diane Ruskin.
Yeah.
On WhatsApp, can I say thanks, GOD?
I think yes, because there it's digital, and therefore it's not going to become erased in a way that it'd be on a piece of paper.
And the text is the same thing as well.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Carl to
Shabbos to you.